Look, I've been sitting in here this morning listening to all these wonderful startup companies. The excitement's there. We're in a boom. Everything's happening. Then I sat through the technical session this afternoon where we were talking about, well, it's kind of like the beware bit. That's all very well, but, you know, so many things can go wrong when we're rushing it and do go wrong. And we had a really good talk on resources and metallurgy and lithium, because we had a lot of lithium talks this morning as well. So I thought this particular talk that I wanted to present is quite a good tie-in for that, because it's focused on where we can actually improve our efficiency across the life of mine, or where to actually do it, which of course will increase profitability. And of course, profitability is the name of the game. Everybody wants to make more money. And I'm hoping I'm going to demonstrate that it actually doesn't take much to lose your profitability, and find the ways where we can actually fix that so that you end up putting into the bank instead of on the tailings dam. So we know that ore bodies are extremely variable in just about everything. And there's quite a few areas where we can improve efficiency. But most of these are probably lost in the initial frenzy of starting up a new company, or the pressure of bringing a project online, which often happens from the corporate side. And often things are missed, or we cut corners, we make compromises. It all happens. And we never usually find out how bad it is until we're actually starting to produce product. And then we have to go back and fix things, and that costs more money and more time. And I'm kind of asking the question of what would happen if we actually started out as we mean to carry on and did all this stuff right from the beginning, so that we'd have a better idea as to how to handle things when they go wrong. So the life of mine cycle, you know, we've got our exploration, resources, reserves, mine planning, mining, processing, is a long, interconnected, continuous thing that lasts for as long as we can actually make it last. And we're talking, you know, 20 years plus usually, from the time the initial concept of a project through to development and then mining and end of mine. At the start, we're all focused on grade. And we've heard many times people saying grade is king, you know, focus on the grade. And that's very true when you start. If you don't have grade, you don't have a project. So clearly, obviously, the first priority when you're starting up and you're developing a project is to make sure that you have your grade. And that happens at the exploration stage. Generally, when we're doing resources, we're focused on grade. When we go reserves, we're focused on grade. Same with mine planning, grade. And it's really only when we get to the processing side that people actually start to really focus on recoverable product. And in actual fact, recoverable product is the ultimate goal of what we're doing. We're trying to create as much mineral content as we can out the back end. That will make us the most money. What would happen if we actually started to focus on recoverable product at a much earlier stage in the life of mine, basically at the exploration stage? It doesn't mean take your focus off on grade, but it means actually putting the focus on all those other parameters that are going to be important for your optimal product recovery at the back end. So just let's talk about recoverable product for a minute. It's, by definition, the amount of valuable metal or mineral that can be recovered by metallurgical treatment. It's almost always, not always, but almost in the past anyway, been associated with the back end part of the life of mine, from the pilot plant stage, mineral processing stage, and then your plant stage. And generally, metallurgical test work is left until that time. There's not a lot of communication between the exploration, the reserves, the resources, and the mine planning stage with input into that part. We at CSA, for example, have been trying to encourage communication between all disciplines, cross-pollinate, I call it, so that everybody has a really good understanding of what everybody else does, and also has an understanding of the parameters that impact product recovery and how they can be managed when problems occur, and they will occur throughout the whole life of mine cycle. So the next few slides are just a generic example, just a cartoon almost, that sort of shows you what you might gain or lose by not focusing on details and perhaps missing the opportunities where you could actually increase efficiency. So let's talk about gold, because gold is sort of like a big thing at the moment. It's $2,500 an ounce at the moment, which is an amazing sort of place to be. So if we were just to take a 600,000 tonne gold deposit at 2 grams per tonne, that's a pretty small deposit, but 2 grams, that's not an unrealistic sort of scenario. That's about 38,600 ounces, which in terms of profit, like total net profit, it's not net, sorry, gross profit, is about 96.5 million tonnes at today's price, and that's nothing to be sneezed at. What I'm showing here is that if we were to drop the grade by 0.1 gram, which isn't a huge amount, but it happens, we would lose nearly $5 million out of that. Drop it another 0.1 gram, we'd lose another 5 million tonnes. We'd basically have lost 10 million tonnes out of the gate. And I put in the 1.75 because I wanted to demonstrate that at that, using those parameters there, we could get a plus or minus change of $2.4 million in gold, depending on whether or not we were trying to improve it or if we've lost it. That's quite a lot. So moving on to the other, I just need to go back to a slide. I forgot a critical thing. With recoverable product, of course, the metal content is grade times tonnes times recovery factor, and which is actually grade times volume times density times recovery factor. And density is the bane of a resource geologist's life because it's never, very rarely done adequately enough. It needs to be really treated with as much care and attention as grade, because it's as variable as grade, particularly in weathered environments. And it very rarely is. I mean, I had a nickel laterite resource I was doing, and they spent so much time and money on getting their grade variability. And then they gave me a 1-figure density value and said, oh, well, this is an average density value of a similar nickel laterite deposits that's 70 kilometres away, and wanted me to make it a measured resource. And I said, sorry, can't do that. So if we were to actually take that same 600,000 tonnes and make it at 2 grams and then drop the density by a 0.1 grams per centimetre cube, which is not a small, not a big amount, but it's indicative of the kind of variability that you will get. And you get a similar sort of scenario here. Basically, for every 0.05 change in density, you would get it's $161 a tonne per that. So in this scenario here, that you basically, at dropping it down, you would lose quite a lot of money as well. If we add dilution into the factor, so if we're assuming that we might put a bit of waste into our ore, which you will, there will be waste going into the plant. It's inevitable. The whole point is to try and minimise that and minimise the effect of that. Just hypothetically, put in a 15% dilution at 0.2 grams. By the time you've gone through that, you have basically dropped your grade from 2 grams per tonne to 1.73, and you've got a $30 million loss of revenue. So this is what happens when we accidentally add waste to ore. So why would we not want to do better than this? The whole point of this is to basically point out the fact that at today's commodity prices, I think it'd be worthwhile to really go back and have a look at your operations, have a look at your projects, have a look at your gap analyses, and just see where you are missing critical information that is going to impact on grade and tonnes and product recovery. And for the recovery factor, I've just done another example here using the same diluted resource. 94% recovery is not unheard of for gold. You might lose another 4.8%, but that's probably a $4.8 million loss that you would happen anyway, because you would never get 100% recovery. But if you drop that recovery even further, then you're starting to look at more and more loss of revenue that you probably don't even realize that you're losing until you actually start to not get what you think you should be getting out of your plant. So the original 100% revenue of 96.5 million tonnes could have dropped to 70 million, and I don't think your shareholders would have been very happy. So how can we fix this? Well, understanding of grade variability, and that's usually done extremely well by everybody. Understanding of variability of tonnes is not done well by everybody. That's where we need to pay attention to density. And by density, it also means both wet and dry density, because if you want to improve profitability, you also need to try and minimise your working costs. And if you have a really good idea of your wet density, your in situ density that your mining contractors are taking out, then you can basically go and have the fight with them when they tell you that they've got this and you say, no, you haven't. You will save money because, you've got to anticipate how much you're going to be digging out. And if you can get between 5 and 10% reconciliation on that, you're doing pretty well, and that's cost effective. Same with the dry tonnes. That's the one that we do our resources on. How we do density is probably the thing that people hesitate on. They say, oh, it's costly to do downhole density. We'll do a few bits of core here. Trying to take core in weathered material just doesn't cut it. You've just really got to find ways where you can get a reasonable spread of density values across your deposit that's going to tie down your variability of tonnes, so that when you're trying to calculate your metal content, you've got a really reasonable chance that you're going to get accurate results. Pay attention to alteration and weathering in terms of product recovery, because the weathering is one of the significant factors in terms of reducing recovery. Anything that's got clay in it, you start putting that through a plant, stuffs up the slurries, it reduces recovery, and you've lost material that's going out, probably in this case to the tailings dam, often to the waste dump as well. I'll talk a little bit about that very briefly before. But the best time, obviously, to collect this data is at the exploration phase. And that's what I meant by starting as you mean to go on. If you start collecting all this data right from day one, when it comes to the resource or to the mining where you're not getting reconciliation, you won't have to go back and spend extra money on getting that extra data, because you'll already have it. And in fact, I've found in reality, most people will probably have a lot of that data, but they're not using it. So this is an opportunity to go back and check to see what you do have, make sure that it's used in its proper way. And that's the time while you're still exploring, is to go out and make sure that you collect the rest of it. I'm not going to go into a big talk about geometallurgy. We've been hearing a few talks about that today, but that is the key to optimizing recoverable product, because that is the key to identifying the differences in the physical properties of your ore and gangue and waste minerals, and identify the properties that will inhibit recovery, like hardness, and whether or not you can, dissolve it easily or crush it, grind it, all these things, the physical properties, which generally are left to be sorted out at the metallurgical stage. If you're doing small-scale variability geomet sampling during the exploration stage, you'll have a much better idea of what's going on. It's an early risk assessment, and it'll give you a much better idea as to how to do your metallurgical samples later on, and that will save you money. That was just a slide to explain the sorts of variables that the geomet sampling can provide you. So in conclusion, it's really, the devil is in the details. If you don't sort of collect all the data at the start, then that's going to be a costly exercise anyway. But it also means that you won't have that information available when you run into problems later on, and we'll have to go back and spend more money. But by doing this, getting a better understanding and a better tie down of your variability of your grade and tons and your product recovery, hence, your metal recovery, that will enhance your profitability, and your shareholders will thank you and might even give you a bonus at the end of the year. So thank you.
Felicity.